Greetings students, this is Professor Davar, and this video is going to be a brief introduction to operating systems. But before we dive into operating systems, let's first have a look at what is hardware and what is software as far as any modern computing system is concerned. Hardware. Computer hardware are the physical parts or components of a computer such as monitor, keyboard, mouse, hard disk, etc., all of which are tangible objects. That means these are the parts that you can touch and feel. It would be good to classify hardware into the following components. First is input devices like keyboard and mouse. Then you have output devices like monitor and printers, etc. Then you have storage devices, memories like hard disk, flash drive, etc. And then you have internal components of this computing system just like CPU, motherboards, etc. Software, in contrast, are the instructions that can be stored and run by the hardware. Computer software, or simply software, is a part of a computer system that consists of data or computer instructions. Computer software includes computer programs, libraries, and related data such as online documentation on digital media. Computer hardware and software require each other, and neither can be realistically used on its own. But we can broadly classify softwares into two types: application software and system software. Application software, or popularly known as apps these days, are the regular programs that you can use to accomplish a task. For example, Photoshop is an application software, and the tasks that you can accomplish using it are numerous, like editing an image, creating a new image, etc. System software, on the other hand, is a program designed to run a computer hardware and other application softwares. Basically, system software is the interface between the hardware and application softwares that you use. An operating system is an example of system software. A typical computing system. Now that we know what is hardware and software, let's have a look at how a typical computing system is organized. This diagram represents, in theory, how a general single-user computing system looks like. At the bottom layer, you have hardware or system resources. Operating system sits on the top of the hardware as the manager. Other applications like Photoshop, Word, etc. cannot generally directly communicate with the hardware and hence have to contact the operating system for access to the hardware. Now consider a scenario where John, as a user, is working with MS Word and would like to save a file to the disk. When he clicks Save, MS Word contacts the operating system and asks for some memory space on the disk. Operating system, being the manager, checks if the required space can be allotted to save the file requested by John. If the space is available, it allots the required space on the hard disk and allows the file to be saved. This is of course a very rudimentary explanation of this file saving process, but it would be sufficient for our purpose of introduction. Before understanding the basics of operating systems, you should know a few things about different types of computer memory. You must have used your flash drive or USB drive to store some kind of data. You must have saved your work on a hard disk of a computer. You might have heard about RAM or random access memory. These are all examples of memory devices or structures. There are numerous types of memory structures involved in a modern computing system. These are broadly classified as volatile and non-volatile. Volatile memory retains information as long as it is plugged to a power source. Non-volatile memories retain information regardless of the power connection. There are volatile memory structures that the CPU makes immediate use of. These are registers, cache, and the main memory. The main memory is also known as random access memory. Your hard disk, solid state devices, optical devices like CDs and DVDs, and magnetic tapes are all examples of non-volatile long-term storage. Now ask yourself this question: what type of memory is your flash drive? Operating systems. An operating system is a system software that manages computer hardware and other software resources and provides common services for computer programs. Basically, operating system is a manager. All the application softwares that you use, like Photoshop, Microsoft Word, they all have to use the hardware to get some job done. Since they do not have direct access to the hardware, they have to call the operating system. And it is the operating system that decides how much memory to give to all these applications. Now, the operating systems basically acts as an intermediary between application programs and computer hardware. Applications frequently make system calls to operating systems to request access to the hardware. Operating systems are found on many devices these days, from cellular phones to video game consoles to web servers and supercomputers. The dominant desktop operating system is Microsoft Windows, followed by Mac OS in the second place, and then varieties of Linux in the third place. In mobile sector, according to the third quarter 2016 data, Android by Google is dominant, followed by iOS by Apple, and then other operating systems just amount to 0.3%. Multiprogramming. One of the most important aspects of a modern computing system is the ability to multiprogram. CPU is a very, very fast piece of hardware. Other components like RAM, hard disk, printers, etc. are extremely slow in comparison. So a single program in general cannot keep the CPU busy at all times. If your system is executing just one program at a time, you are actually wasting a lot of CPU power. Just look at this. When you work on a computer, you generally have multiple programs running. You might be writing your paper and at the same time listening to the music. Something might be downloading in the background too. This is multiprogramming. All of these operations are too slow for the CPU by themselves. So the CPU multiprograms. Multiprogramming increases CPU utilization by organizing jobs so that CPU always has one to execute. To utilize the speed of CPU, the operating system keeps several jobs in the memory simultaneously, as shown in this image. Let's look at the components of the system software that we are referring to as operating system. Usually, a big software is always created in parts, and these parts interact with each other to achieve a certain goal. The most important parts of a typical operating system are kernel, device driver, and GUI, or graphical user interface. Kernel. Operating system, as you know by now, has a primary task of managing hardware resources and distribute them among the applications who need to have access to them. The main component of an operating system that is responsible for accomplishing this task is known as kernel. It is also sometimes called the core of an operating system. This has the task of loading the applications into the memory, making sure they do not interfere with each other, and allowing them to share the use of CPU efficiently. The kernel also handles file storage to and from the secondary storage devices such as hard disks and optical drives. The kernel of different operating systems may be designed separately, which in turn depends upon the area of use. Device drivers. We can connect many devices to a computer, like a printer, USB drive, a mouse, a keyboard, etc. All these devices have their respective device drivers that lets them communicate with the operating system. These days, hundreds of device drivers come packaged with operating systems. If you happen to install a device whose driver is not present with your operating system, you will have to get the driver and install it before you can use the device. Graphical user interface. You might have heard about the term GUI. GUI is a visually appealing way to interact with an operating system. Back in 60s and 70s, users used to interact with operating systems mainly through a keyboard. There were no buttons to click on the screen and only keyboard commands. That was the GUI of the past. Contemporary operating systems have a full-blown graphical user interfaces, such you might have seen in Mac OS, Windows, or perhaps GNOME on Linux. All these operating systems still carry the old-fashioned command line interface though. So let's summarize what have we learned so far. An operating system is a system software that manages computer hardware and other software resources and provides common services for computer programs. Operating systems are found on many devices, such as from cellular phones and video games, consoles to web servers and supercomputers. Kernel is the core of an operating system. It has the task of managing hardware resources and distribute them among applications who need to have access to them. Other parts of a modern computing systems are device drivers and a GUI. Thank you.